We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 42b. The Gemara says, Itmar, we have the following Machlokas Amoraim. This is a Machlokas Amoraim within Rav Huna. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Huna. Rabba says that Rav Huna says, Mikra Mole Dibar HaKasav Lo Yitam. And the Pasuk says clearly that a person who's a Nazir is not allowed to become Tameh. Kishu Omer Lo Yavo. So when it says that he shouldn't come into an area of Tumah, Lahazhiro ala Tumah, Lahazhiro ala Bia. That warns him about Tumah, and it also warns him about entering an Ohel Tumah, that is an area that's enclosed, that has Tumah within it. Avol Tumah v'Tumah lo. But if you have Tumah and then subsequent another Tumah, that's not going to apply. The prohibition will not apply in that case. Tosa says, Amar Rabba bar Rav Kahana. Again, we have Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Huna. Mikra Mole Dibar HaKasav Lo Yitam Kishu Omer Lo Yavo. Gabe Nazir Ksivi Hani Kroy. These are psukim by Nazir. Lahaziro al Hatuma, Lahaziro al Abiyah. Warns the Nazir about becoming Tameh. Warns the Nazir about entering an area of Tumah. Kedim Mefarish B'samach, as will be explained. Kishenichnas LaOhel HaMeis. Let's say you have a Nazir and he's entering into an Ohel where there's a dead body. Im hisrubo mishum lo yitama mishum lo yavo. Let's say they warn that Nazir and they give him two warnings. They say if you enter into this Ohel HaMeis, it's a problem of lo yitama, you're becoming tamei, and it's a problem of lo yavo, you're entering into an Ohel HaMeis. Lo keshtayim. So he's going to get two sets of malchus ushtayim hayu v'asachas. The idea here is that the tumah all happens at one time. However, says Rabba from Rav Huna, when it comes to tumah, you're not going to have a situation of two. Meaning, im hisru bo al tatame, if they warn him, don't become tamei multiple times, it's not going to be considered a violation of two prohibitions. Now the Gemara will bring the Mishnah. Our Mishnah seems to say on the contrary. If we tell the Nazir al tatame, it is going to be considered multiple violations, and we will ask that question on Rabba. So that's Rabba's opinion. Again, if you have tumah and bia, that can be two prohibitions, but tumah and tumah, you don't have a violation of two prohibitions. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yosef says, Hoelokim, by God, Amar Rav Huna afilu tumah v'tumah. Rav Huna would say that there's multiple violations, even in a situation where the Nazir becomes tamei, and then subsequently becomes tamei again. The Amar Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said, Nazir shaya omid beveis hakvaros, if a Nazir is standing in a cemetery, v'hoshitu lo meso, and then they extend to him his relative that's dead. The point over here is a Nazir is like a Kohen Gadol. He's not allowed to become tamei even to his relatives. Umesacher, or let's say they extend to him some other corpse, v'nagabo, and he touches it, chayiv, he's chayiv. Amai, why is he chayiv? Again, why is he chayiv on multiple violations? Hamatami v'kayim, isn't he already standing there in tumah? Elalav shmami, no, rather, don't we see from here, Amar Rav Huna, afilu tumah v'tumah. There, Rav Huna says, as halach, it's not only by tumah and bia, which happen at the same time when the Nazir enters the Ohel HaMeis, but even by tumah and tumah, where he's tamei and then subsequently touches something else that's tamei. In that case also, there would be multiple violations. And the Gemara continues, Eisve Abaya asks, and Rav Yosef, again, Rav Yosef said that according to Rav Huna, a Nazir would be chayiv multiple times for multiple contacts with Tumah. The Brisa says, Kohen, some have the gears of Nazir here, Nazir shaya lo meis munach al kseifo, if you have a Nazir and there's a dead body on his shoulder, v'hoshito lo meiso, and then they extend to him his relative that's dead, umeisacher, some other corpse, v'nagabo, and he touches it, yochol yehei chayiv, I might think he's chayiv, Talmud lomar v'lo yechalel. The pasuk says v'lo yechalel b'misha eino mechulel. We're talking about somebody who's not already profaned. Yotzazeshu mechulel v'yomi. That would exclude this individual who's already profaned, meaning he already has a corpse on his shoulder. Extending him another corpse is not going to be an additional violation. And this seems to be a question directly on Rav Yosef, because Rav Yosef said that by tumah and tumah, if you have multiple contacts with tumah, there are going to be additional violations. And so the Gemara says, Amar lei, so Rav Yosef responds to Abaya. And according to you, this Brisa should pose a difficulty for the Mishnah. Or another way of saying it is the Mishnah Rav Yosef is saying supports what I'm saying. Because what did we learn in our Mishnah? It says, let's say a person is becoming tamei meis all day, the person referring to a Nazir, he's only going to be chayiv one. However, Amru lo al tatame, if they tell him, don't become tamei, chayiv al kol achas v'achas, he's chayiv on each one. And so you see exactly, says Rav Yosef, you see exactly what I am saying. V'amai, why should he be chayiv for each one? Hamitami v'kayim, he's already standing in tumah. And so therefore you see from the Mishnah is a question on the Brisa, but the Mishnah also is a support for Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef. Elakasha adadi, but the Gemara says, but still, it turns out now that the Brisa and the Mishnah seem to be in contradiction, because the Mishnah says if it's the case of al tatame, he's chayiv multiple times, and the Brisa that Abaye says, it says, let's say he has it on his shoulder, he has the mace on his shoulder, and then they extend to him another mace, that he's not going to be chayiv an additional time. And so the Gemara explains, and some Rishonim learn this is according to Rabbah, others learn we're going now according to Rav Yosef. In any case, the Gemara says, Lo kash, it's not difficult. The answer to the resolution between the Bryce and the Mishnah is that we do make a distinction. We don't always say there's going to be a chiyah for multiple incidents of contact. Sometimes it applies, sometimes it doesn't apply. Kan b'chiborin, kan shelo b'chiborin. It depends if it's attached, and here we're talking where it is not attached. What we mean to say is, if the person is in contact, that's chiborin. He's in contact with tumah right now, and then he comes in contact with a second mace, meaning he's touching both at the same time. So in that situation, we say he's not going to be chayiv twice. However, if it's shelo b'chiborin, meaning he became tamei, and then they say al titzma, don't become tamei again, and he becomes tamei again. So it happens one after the other. So in that situation, according to Rabbah, we would say, or like our Mishnah, according to our Mishnah, we would say that the Nazir would be chayiv multiple times. But the Gemara continues, V'tumah b'chiborin do'raisa. This concept of tumah b'chiborin, is that even a do'raisa concept? Ha'amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rav Yanai. Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef says that Rav Yanai says, Lo amru tumah b'chiborin elo l'truma v'kachim. He made a statement that tumah b'chiborin only applies by truma and kachim. Avol l'nazir v'yosa pesach lo, but it doesn't even apply by nazir and somebody, let's say, who brings a korban pesach. You can't bring a korban pesach b'tumah. It doesn't apply in those cases. Meaning, it seems to be that tumah b'chiborin is a concept of rabbanon or machmer by truma and kachim. It's not even a concept on a doraisa level. V'yamr doraisa ma'ishnaf. You're going to say that tumah b'chiborin is a concept on a doraisa level. Why are we making a distinction here between truma and kachim and nazir and osa pesach? And the Gemara answers simply, you're confusing what the term tumah b'chiborin means. Kan b'chibure adam bi'adam, kan b'chibure adam b'meis. In one case, when we use the word tumah b'chiborin, meaning in the case over here where we said that tumah b'chiborin applies to truma and kachim and doesn't apply to nazir and osa pesach, there we're talking about where a person touches another person who's touching a mace. So that kind of tumah for that first person who touches the mace, that tumah is only the rabbanan. We apply it only by truma and kachim. We wouldn't apply it by nazir and osa pesach. But when we're talking about tumah b'chiborin over here, meaning we're talking about the halacha where if you have tumah and tumah, according to the brisa, the nazir is not going to be chayiv. That's talking about a situation where the nazir is touching a mace and then he touches another mace. That's what we mean by tumah b'chiborim. In that situation, since he's already touching one mace, touching the additional mace at the same time, that's not going to be an additional violation. And that's what the Gemara explains. Avol tumah v'tumah lo damitami v'koyim. Again, tumah and tumah at the same time. He's touching two sources of tumah, so there he already was tamei, so there's not going to be an additional violation. And the Gemara continues, Tumah ubiya nami. The Gemara says, 1 second, let's go back to what we originally said. We said that everybody seems to agree that Tumah and Bia, there can be two violations, but that also should be a problem. Hametame v'koi, he's already tamei, so now he's going to get two violations, he's tamei anyways. And the Gemara says not necessarily. Amar Rav Yochanan says, kan bebayis, kan besad. In one case we're talking in a house, and in one case we're talking in a field. And Tosas explain, kan bebayis, nichnas bebayis shebesocho meis. If he enters into a house where there's a mace inside the house, v'lo nitma kodem lachein. The point is he wasn't tamei before. It's all happening at the same time. This is really as we explained above. So in that situation, oz lucky shtayim. That's when he gets two malchus. Al lo yitama v'al lo yavo, because he's violating lo yitama and he's violating lo yavo. Shevavia labayis bo shtayim ola. By entering in the house, he gets these two things all at once, these two violations at once. There you can get two sets of malchus. But kan besada, but if you're talking about in a field, kilomar kol tumah v'tumah v'lo ohel. The way Tos understands is we're making a general distinction. If you have a situation without ohel, lo mashkacha sheyischayev shtayim b'basa achas. You're not going to have any way where it's going to all happen two violations at one time. Shareim naga bebeis meisim b'basa achas, because if he touches two dead bodies at one time, kula chada hasrahi, that's all called one warning. Tasra delav de tumah didehi v'im hayaton meis al kseifo v'isra ba'ala tumah v'oshitu lo meis acher. Or let's say he already has tumah on his shoulder, and they warn him, and then they extend him another mace. So mechulov v'yomed, who again he's already profaned. V'ein kanto seves tumah and hasheni. There is no additional. The point is, by the bias or by the oel, you have this concept of two violations happening at one time. But in a situation outside of an oel, you don't have that. Rashi has a slightly different approach. Kan bebayis, kan besoda. So the idea is ki amrina nanon dechayev al habiyah v'al hatumah kagon de nichnas bebayis shameis l'socho. When we say you're chayev both on biyah and tumah, that's again you enter a house in ohel where there's a mace. The tumah biyah bahadei adodi. The same basic idea as Tosus. The tumah and the biyah happen at the same time. Askin, they happen at the same time. V'idach, now in the case where that's not true, the amr niyatzah zeshem mechul v'yomed, where we say no, you don't get two violations. The way Rashi understands, kagon shenaga b'meis shebesada, he touches a mace in the field. V'hadar nichnas b'yoel shemeis tachtav, and then subsequently he enters an ohel where there's a mace. The potter, so there already we'd say potter lafisha kvar mechul v'yomed, because he was already profaned, he was already standing and profaned at the time that he entered. It's the same basic idea. The point is that when we talk about the fact that he's chayiv on tumah and biyah, that's when he enters an ohel mace, and both violations happen at the same time. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph.